Hello, everybody, and welcome to TEDMED's live event today, focusing on the great challenge of coping with the impact of stress. I'm Ben Miller, and I'm going to be moderating today's discussion, which will run about an hour. I want to thank everybody for participating here today. This is going to be a lot of fun. This session is a part of the Great Challenges program sponsored by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And if you're not familiar with Great Challenges, please take a look. Go online, look at TEDMED and what they're doing for Great Challenges. The goal of Great Challenges program is to look at 20 of the most complex problems in health and medicine, issues that really can't be solved with a magic bullet or a one-shot cure policy. The mission here is not to solve these issues, but to share ideas from many disciplines to reach a better understanding of them than we had before. We're going to be taking questions from you, all of you that are in the Hangout here today on Google and on Facebook and on Twitter. We're going to be taking questions. We're already receiving lots of questions already. The Twitter handle for this event is TEDMED, @TEDMED. And just tag your questions with the hashtag #GreatChallenges or #GreatChallenges, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. But we've had quite a few of these come in already. So as mentioned, my name is Ben Miller. I'm a psychologist in the Department of Family Medicine at the University of Colorado, and TEDMED has asked me to moderate today's event. And boy, do we have an event. We're delighted to welcome an unbelievably talented team of experts today who we're going to call our challenge team to lead the discussion on this topic. So we're going to start. I'm going to walk down the list here and tell you a little bit about these folks. The two-sentence bio really doesn't do them justice, so I encourage you to look them up online afterwards. We're going to start with Dr. Kathleen Hall, who's an internationally recognized expert in stress, work-life balance, and mindful living. She's the founder and CEO of the Stress Institute and the Mindful Living Network. We also have Lisa Merlo-Booth, who's a straight-talking and highly effective relationship coach, speaker, and blogger with over 20 years of experience in the field of therapy and relationship coaching. She's widely known for her straight talk on women and for her emphasis on teaching women to get out of responding in the extremes. Next, we have Terry Real, who's a national recognized family therapist, author, and teacher, as well as the founder of the Relational Health Institute. He's particularly well known for his groundbreaking work on men and male psychology, as well as his work on gender and couples. He's been in private practice for 25 years. Good for you. Dr. Catherine Nordal is a licensed psychologist and executive director for the APA Practice Director. Catherine manages a variety of activities, including efforts to shape the evolving healthcare market and a nationwide public education campaign to communicate the value of the field of psychology. And finally, please welcome Peter Kuhar, who's I'm going to get this wrong, Peter, Azumio's Chief Technology Officer. Azumio is dedicated to the improvement of people's wellness by influencing healthy behavior through the use of innovative web applications, mobile applications. So welcome, everybody. You can see here we've got a talented pool. So we're going to start with some stats that actually came out of Catherine, your shop. The American Psychological Association reported that 75% of adults experiencing moderate to high levels of stress in the past month, and nearly half reported that their stress has increased in the past year. Even this morning while I was at the gym managing my own stress, I saw a news item that popped up on CNN. And literally, as we're preparing for this chat today, I saw that NPR's got another study on stress. It's everywhere. So Dr. Nordal, you played a critical role in the Stress in America survey where this data was reported. To open things up, would you share a bit about the study and your reflections on just what that 75% data point means as we open this dialogue on stress? And as you do so, could you define a little bit about what we mean by stress?
Sure, Ben. We do the Stress in America survey every year and have had different emphases in different years. Some years we focused on children, some years we focused on chronic illness. And one thing we do, part of the good news is that Americans are reporting a lower level of overall stress over the last few years. And that's the good news. The bad news, though, is they're still reporting that their individual stress levels are above a level that they find to be healthy. I would describe stress, I think, as a physiological state. The term is used in a lot of ways. It's used as stressors, or I'm stressed, or I have stress. But I would define stress as a physiological state that's on a continuum. So all of us need a little bit of stress, or we might not want to get out of bed in the morning, might not be motivated to go earn a paycheck or do good things in the world. But we don't want that stress level to get so high that it then begins to interfere with our performance. And we would call that distress, the level of stress that can create and or exacerbate both physical and mental health.
Thank you, Catherine. And this was a really important point from a lot of the folks online. David Levy, one of the Facebook users of TEDMED, he wanted to know if this panel could start off by just describing what is stress. So Catherine, thanks for kicking us off. Kathleen, I'm going to go to you. How do you define stress? What is stress to you?
Stress to me is any environmental factor that affects you psychologically, physiologically, in any way. As a matter of fact, I wish we could shift more to the world to see that it's actually a physics, it's a law of physics, that if I sit here and put my hand on my arm, my finger, and I press it, if it's acute and I pick up my finger, my arm is going to be fine. But if I hold that finger down chronically and keep pressing hard, I'm going to get a bruise. So when I'm talking to regular people trying to explain what stress is, I try to use very simple examples about what is in their environment that's affecting them and causing pressure on their physical body, psychological, and emotional bodies.
That's great, and that's very helpful. Lisa, let's go to you. How do you define stress?
I would say stress is your body's normal physical reaction to events that lead to upset, overwhelm, or help you feel like you're out of balance. And it's just like your body starts feeling a little revved, a little anxious, a little tight, and it's a normal response to the everyday events that are happening in your life.
Great.
That feel too much.
Great. I think we're hearing a theme here. Peter, how about you?
So yeah, for us, stress is your body being prepared to deal with problems. And in our case, we try to measure that with how this stress affects your cardiovascular system, how the heart rate changes. So it's more like what changes in your body when you're under pressure dealing with problems.
Great. And Terry, clean up here. How do you define stress?
Well, I also talk about stress and distress, or good stress and bad stress. Good stress is a challenge that you have to stretch out of your comfort zone, and you have a physiological response of some discomfort, but it's good for you, and it's seen as positive. Distress or bad stress has to do with the discrepancy between the experience you're having and the one that you think you should be having between when you're evaluating your own performance, for example, or you see yourself as having circumstances that are less than optimal, and it's the physiological response to that.
That's a great point, and I think it's important for the public and those watching here to recognize, as Terry, you just said, stress doesn't always have to be a bad thing, and I think we're going to get into that a little bit later here. But let me thank you all for starting off with a wonderful description and definition of stress. Let me take another question from Facebook here, and this is from the Facebook user Cassia Rai. She asks, what are the best stress management tactics when we can avoid stress that are productive and helpful and not maladaptive? And I'm going to start with you, Kathleen, on this one.
What I've done is taken a lot of medical information at some of the big research institutions and actually created an acronym that incorporates, I think, the 4 roots of how to handle stress, and it's called self-care, SELF. And so S is for anything serenity, whether it's listening to an app that has music, whether it's meditating for a few minutes. E is exercise, and we think about physical exercise, but also we need to exercise our brains, because when we do exercise our brains with all these wonderful programs we can get online, or a lot of apps that we use, it actually helps with de-stressing you. And L is love. We know that people need social support, and that really helps reduce stress. And then finally, we're getting more research on food. Food is medicine, I believe. I've seen big changes in patients and clients. And we can see that things like sugar, alcohol actually exacerbate stress, and then there are things like B6s and different things that can actually help you reduce stress.
That's really wonderful. Thank you for that acronym. And I'm going to go to others and ask the same question, but is there a place online that people could go to reference that?
Oh, absolutely. Stressinstitute.com.
Thank you. There you go. Let me repeat the question here, and then I'm going to turn it. Lisa, I'd like to hear a little bit more from you on this. The question was, just to recap, what are the best stress management techniques that when we can't avoid stress that are productive and helpful and not maladaptive?
Well, they're the standard ones, which is exercise, meditation. In general, what I would say is slow down. I think that stress revs us up, and so in relationships, what that leads to is extreme thinking, extreme reactions, extreme behaviors. And so what you really want to do is you want to slow down, breathe, think, and when I say think, keep it to the present, right? We start thinking, we start getting stressed, and we start going to this all or nothing thinking, it's always going to be bad, I'm never going to be able to do this. So get out of the extreme thinking. With your behaviors, sometimes, especially in relationships, we excuse our bad behaviors. Well, I'm stressed, so, you know, of course I'm going to vent. And that just leads to more stress because it hurts your relationships. So in general, slow down, stay out of the extremes, and stay in the present. Be mindful. You're stressed about this one incident, break it down.
Thank you, Lisa. And let me kind of take that question and evolve it a little bit. And Terry, I'm going to turn to you on this one. One of our Facebook users actually asked a question. It's very complimentary here. And I think it implies that when we are stressed, we recognize this. And so this question came from the Facebook user, Dan Camacho. And he wants to know, are we aware of stress always that can do us harm? Or is there a way that we can become so accustomed to feeling stressed that we simply aren't aware of it anymore?
I think it is true that we can be unaware of stress. Our body, however, remains aware. The body keeps the score, whether we're aware of it consciously or not. I think that stress comes often from a feeling of helplessness, of being out of control, of the discrepancy between what's going on and what you think should be going on, how you're responding and how you think you should be responding. And there's often a theme of helplessness. And so one of the things that I talk to people about is don't raise the water, lower the bridge. When you're feeling helpless and out of control, ask yourself, is the thing that you're trying to control controllable? There's an awful lot of letting go that is part of the serenity of learning how to manage stress.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Terry, because we just received a question online from Twitter from @CaregiverSN, and they wanted to know a little bit more about these situations. And specifically, the question is, how do you cope with stress when you're in a chronic stress role, like as a caregiver? And I think, as you just said, you have to recognize the controllable and uncontrollable. But when you're a caregiver and you're constantly faced with that, sometimes it may be difficult to distinguish the two.
Well, it's true. I mean, I return to the good old serenity prayer that AA has been using for 40 years. There's a reason why they talk about it being serene. And the serenity comes from distinguishing between what is in your control, which is usually your own performance, and what is not in your control, which is usually the outcome of events. If you're a caregiver, you may be having somebody who's ill or even terminal, and obviously that's out of your control. You start focusing on the performance of your job and how you're doing, and go home and go to sleep after a good day of doing your very best.
So Peter, I want to take what Terry just said and turn to you. What you described that you do is you actually give patients, individuals, the power to better recognize, what's going on. And these mobile tools that you've created, can you tell us a little bit about the mobile tool and maybe how those connect back to the conversation that we're having on recognizing stress?
Our application is called Stress Check. Is basically measures heart rate with the camera on the phone and analyzes heart rate variability to measure just the physiological impact of stress on your body. And that helps a lot with the awareness of stress. So if you're rushing through the week, you're kind of not even aware that you're constantly under stress. And these kind of tools kind of help you kind of get the perspective on things. We also included some ways to combine these measurements of stress together with what person feels about stress, what causes his stress. And then when you look at the whole week of measurements, or maybe even a month, you can see what's your constant stressor. And a lot of times people see that it's not as big of a problem. I mean, they're dealing with it pretty well, but it still causes a lot of pressure on them. And in a lot of cases, it's just something that kind of gives them awareness to kind of, like others said, step back and just reevaluate things.
So I think, Catherine, and thank you very much for that, Peter. That's a great point. And Catherine, going back to you a minute, we've started off with some statistics from the APA on stress. People are starting to become more aware of their stressors. Can you say a little bit more about what Peter just described in terms of being able to actually do something in the moment with stress, and then what you all found in terms of how people are starting to manage or cope with stress a little bit more effectively?
I think, and I'd like to add, though, Ben, too, to this idea about what are some effective means of dealing with stress. I think in some of the the experts certainly alluded to it, and that is I think we have to think about our thinking, and that's sort of related to the serenity thing, but people's outlook and how they evaluate things that they see as stressors, and do they tend to catastrophize, or are they able to put things in better perspective? And I think depending upon whether you see your life as the glass half empty or the glass half full, or the situation then drives what sort of strategies may work for you. We are finding from our surveys, though, that folks are more aware of stress. Interestingly, women seem to be more intuitive about that sort of thing than men, although I guess that's not maybe quite so surprising. As a result of that, women tend to report more stress than men do, report more symptoms, although they are certainly equally as capable of taking care of their stress. But we do find an increased awareness. I think part of our mind-body health campaign at the American Psychological Association, and in our subsequent surveying through the years, we are finding that people are much more aware of the physical consequences of stress, the psychological consequences of stress. They have more of an appreciation that stress can be harmful to them if not managed appropriately, and in fact are turning to or trying to turn to their healthcare system to help them deal better with stress.
Excellent. So, Lisa, let me turn to you. We just got a question in response to what Catherine was saying here, and it's from a Twitter user at I'm going to butcher these guys, I'm sorry, Chitankin. And the question is, are there long-term or potentially permanent physiological effects of chronic stress on an individual? And if so, what does that look like?
Absolutely. There are many long-term effects, from obesity to heart disease to even to cancer. And the long-term effects is often, Terry had said earlier that there's good stress and bad stress. And good stress doesn't necessarily have long-term effects. It's a short burst, it's motivating, it gets you moving, but if you have chronic long-term stress, it wears down your body. And there was a study done by Dr. Darby Saxby on relationships, and Dr. Saxby found that in relationships, people who were in chronically unhappy relationships had an increase in heart disease, in cancer, in depression, and it's because the body doesn't get a chance to regroup. It doesn't get a chance to just rest, so it just wears it down.
And so let's talk a little bit more about that. Let me come back to Kathleen on this one. When the body is so worn down from perpetual stress, what can an individual do? I think that this reflects back to something that we said at the beginning, which is what happens when you're just so inundated with stress, you stop paying attention that you are stressed and you just accept it as kind of the way of life. What do we do in this case?
I think that most of the people I see, especially doing corporate work or doing work with the inner city people that I do, is that they flood and say, I am so stressed. And then when you really try to delineate what they're stressed about, they use one blanket, I'm stressed, I'm stressed. So what I do is, again, I'm an acronym person because I try to make things very simple for these people, and I actually write books on each one of these acronyms. So the one is, it's ACE, and all you do is pretend like a credit and debit, like you are balancing your checkbook. And on the credit, see what gives you life. Is it your children, reading a book, having your dog, whatever it is? And on the debit side of that, you put what is stressing you out. Is it a bad relationship? Is it your husband? Is it your work? Is it that you are overweight and you're eating? So that gives you kind of, am I more on the credit side or more on the debit? And then C is choices. People feel victimized, and that's what really affects me when I work with them. And they have to feel that they have the power of choice and some modicum of control over their life. And then E is once they just pick one thing on the debit side, whether it's a relationship, whether it's eating or whatever, and then they choose to change it. It's amazing to see the energy of that experience. And they can remember it every day. And then when they come back, they have quantitative things that they can say to me so that we can talk about it, instead of, my marriage is really stressful. Well, or my work, I really don't like it. It helps too with them wanting to change in this world of science and studies that we live in right now, to be able to quantify and qualify what their problems are.
That's great. Thank you, Kathleen. Let's shift gears here just for a second, folks, because we are getting a gazillion questions from Twitter. And thank you for those of you watching online. The questions are amazing. We're not going to be able to get to all of these, so I hope the dialogue continues offline. This question, I'm actually going to turn to Terry first on this one. And this is from Twitter handle MD Energize. And the question is this: what can employers do to help healthcare providers better cope with stress? Meaning, is there a role for employers in this equation?
I think there absolutely is a role for employers in this equation. And the first thing is education. I think that healthcare providers need to take care of themselves along with caretaking other people. I think that healthcare providers often get up close and personal with fairly traumatic life experiences, and we need to take that seriously. So I think the first role is saying, you know what, healthcare provider, you need to provide a little care for yourself so that you don't burn out and you process some of these intense experiences that you may be in the middle of.
Great. Catherine, do you want to respond to that at all? What can employers do to better help with stress?
I think if we talk about employers in general, we have a very successful psychologically healthy workplace program at the American Psychological Association, where we actually interact and work and coach businesses in the process of doing the kinds of things that they need to do, whether it's a wellness program in the workplace, whether it's adequate health benefits so that employees that are stressed can get the help that they need, and then a number of other kinds of different sorts of interventions around employee recognition and that sort of thing. What we have found in those programs is that our companies that are chosen to receive the awards on an annual basis have much lower employee turnover, lower employee burnout, fewer people that say that they're thinking about changing their lives, and they are more productive. So we know there are a lot of interventions that can be very effectively done in the workplace through a combination of wellness programs and employee benefits.
Okay, Lisa, you want to add to that?
Yeah, one of the things I would say is I think that corporations and employers really have to pay attention to the type of environment that they have. I get so many clients coming into my office talking about just really harsh work environments, whether it's getting 70-hour work weeks or expecting their employees to be available 24/7, or bosses who are bullies, all of the, or maybe the bosses aren't, but the bosses are allowing coworkers to really undermine each other. And I think that that's a huge stressor, and that all the businesses, they have to start cleaning it up emotionally, relationally, and pressure-wise. And if they did, it would absolutely help their bottom line. But right now, it's really hurting them.
Yeah, and it's a great point. And I think when we talk about the employer community, it's often important to describe what we mean by productivity. There's absenteeism and there's presenteeism. And if you think about the role of stress, absenteeism, the folks that are so stressed and so worn down, they just don't show up to work. Whereas presenteeism, they're so stressed, they're showing up to work and they're just sitting there staring at the wall. It's like me on Monday morning. I just kind of sit there and stare. But you have to be able, an employer community really needs to be able to better understand this and address this. So great points all. I'm going to keep going. Peter, I'm going to turn to you for a second. We just got a question that was really looking at the distinction here between stress of it, and this is from @2 Health Guru online, our good friend Greg Masters. He wanted to know, with regard to stress, is it a matter of better management or letting go?
I think that you can't really let go of everything. There's some things that you can let go, some things you just can't, because you usually can't just change a job, or relationship problems are also hard to change. So it's a lot about better management. First, being aware of it, and then manage it in a proper way, and kind of put away on the importance of it, right? Really, does it have a really that short-term impact, or do I have time to fix things? Yeah, it's a balance of things. Depends on the situation, though.
And Peter, just to stay with you for a second, could you say a little bit more about how maybe Azumio is using technology to better support stress awareness and recovery?
So we are trying to build something that's more wholesome, not just stress, but everything that's health related. A big connection is between sleep and stress. Mm-hmm. So we also have apps that are on awareness of how well you sleep, how much you sleep, and on the other side we connect this with stress, so we can see how your stress impacts sleep, and vice versa also. If you don't sleep enough, if you don't sleep well, you are not that capable of handling stress or dealing with stressful situations. And this can kind of loop up in a negative cycle that stress causes lack of sleep, and lack of sleep causes stress, and we're trying to make people aware of what's going on with their bodies in that regard.
Great, thank you, Peter. Again, fielding questions here, and I'm going to try and keep with the theme here for a minute. With regard to, we heard, I think from everybody on the panel, we talked a little bit about the physiological responses. We talked about our body's response to stress or stressors. And a question from Facebook really had to do with anxiety, and I want to kind of connect these dots here for a second. I'm not going to be able to say the Facebook user's name, but the question is around the anxiety causes stress and vice versa, really implying the bidirectional relationship here. What are some good ways to deal with anxiety-related stress? And the comment in parentheses here is, please don't say exercise. So we've talked a little bit about strategies here, folks, but I'm wondering if maybe we can kind of connect some dots that people out there are trying to connect with an anxiety disorder and a stress disorder. Let's start with Kathleen. Let's start with you on this one.
I think it's important to realize that when a person has anxiety all the time, they are not aware of it at all. And they are living, whether it's slamming something down or racing in a car, it's hard for them to realize how anxious they are unless someone brings it up to them. So we do a big thing here, especially in corporations, where we'll work on having a buddy system. And the buddy system is where you actually partner with somebody at work. You can do it at home with a partner, a spouse, a friend, a coworker, and you actually check in. You can text them, you can meet at the water cooler, you can have a cup of coffee, but what they will do is give you information, either behaviorally, you know, what you're doing. You're eating fast, you're screaming, you're doing this. Or they ask you and check in with you and say, you know, what's the problem here? Because again, stress and anxiety, especially anxiety, people that have been anxious, especially since childhood maybe, because of problems they've had when they were young, and they carry this anxiety with them a lot in their life, a huge part of their life. They get so used to it. Lots of times in a buddy system, it helps you recognize it. Because if you go to a therapist or a psychiatrist, you're seeing them once a week, once every 2 weeks, and they may be managing your medicine and managing you, but I think it's really, really important during your life cycle to have somebody to partner with.
Okay, Catherine, you want to wrap us up on anxiety and stress?
Sure, and what I would like to say, Ben, I think is, you know, anxiety, whether it is physiological, is a state of arousal as well as a lot of hyperthinking. There are a number of strategies for it. One of the things that I would get concerned about with anxiety, though, is it seems to be a quick reaction to physicians, for example, maybe, or actually patients wanting medication because anxiety really is uncomfortable. So I think a lot of the stress-related activities that we've talked about, but certainly one of the things that's really at the root of anxiety is the way that we think about things and what we say to ourselves about certain situations that then can just help to fuel that. So I think anxiety is a response to stress, and it would be an extreme response to stress, and certainly one that should prompt someone to seek some professional help if they're not able to take care of those symptoms on their own.
Well, thank you all. This is amazing. We're halfway through, and we are still getting questions fast and furious here. So I'm going to keep flying away with these. I'm going to stay on the physiological for one more minute because lots of folks out there are interested in this. One of the Twitter users who's currently watching, Kate Ellington, at Kate Ellington, asked, can personalized medicine measure stress, specifically cortisol or CRPs, C-reactive proteins? Does anyone want to take that? Anybody? Or we can just say, we'll get back to you, Kate. That's a great question, and you stumped the experts.
Well, and then I'm not a physician, but I will take a stab at that. We do know that when people are stressed, that there is just a cascade of physiological responses that dump hormones into the system, and those are some of the physiological basis for what exacerbates or help to create certain kinds of chronic illnesses. We don't have a, quote, stress test. There certainly are instruments to measure anxiety, instruments to measure depression. There may be some physiological measuring that can be done in terms of some of the hormone levels in the blood, but I'm not aware of that being used on a regular kind of basis, even though we do know that adrenaline and cortisols and those sorts of things do get dumped into the system, as well as does insulin. And causes havoc then with blood sugar. So there are lots of physiological things that happen when we get stressed that can make us feel very anxious. If you're loaded up on adrenaline, that's probably about like 4 Starbucks with an extra shot or something, and it can make you feel pretty uptight.
Peter, you want to add in on this one?
Yeah, so there's some ways to measure things indirectly, like with our stress check app, and there are devices that are measuring cortisol levels from the saliva. There's some devices that came out in Japan, but we didn't see anything in the market here in the US.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on. I'm a policy guy here, folks, so I'm going to ask a little bit about policy. And we got a great question on healthcare policy from @KateKellyMPH, and she asked, how can the Affordable Care Act influence how the healthcare system treats stress? And Lisa, if we can, let's start with you. Are there any things that you know of within current health policy, whether it be the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act or some of the really novel things that are happening at the state level that you think can better help our communities address stress or manage stress?
You know what? Let me pass on that. I'll let someone else jump in. Let me think for a sec.
Okay, great. Terry, let me go to you, Terry. Do you have any ideas on that one?
You know what? I'm not a policy guy. I'm going to pass on this one too. And
I'm letting my bias be shown here. I'm sorry. I'm taking the questions. I'm making them mine. All right, Catherine, I know you got something to say on this one.
Yeah, sure. Very happy to, Ben. I think there's some really great news with the Affordable Care Act. As we know, we're going to have tens of millions of more Americans that will have access to health care. And in that health care and the Medicaid expansion and through the health insurance exchanges, we have mental health and substance use disorder parity, which means that people will be able to get assistance for mental health and substance use disorders. So that's one great thing. There's a real push towards integrating care, which means that hopefully more of these kinds of problems that individuals have will be picked up in the primary care environment, treated there in a triage sort of manner, and then referred out to specialists who can help. And there's also an emphasis on prevention and screening for things like depression, obesity, substance abuse. So hopefully as the system gets kicked off and as care becomes more integrated and there's more emphasis on prevention, we will have individuals having these sorts of problems picked up at an earlier point in their trajectory. And we know, all of us know, that when you can get to a problem at the beginning of it, it's not such an uphill battle to try to get to a good solution much more quickly.
Thanks for that, Catherine. And actually, you answered a Twitter question that came out there with your response just there. That was from @KHanlon. She asked, how can societal stress be best addressed by an integrated behavioral health and primary care system? And I think you just hit on that really quite nicely here. I'm going to just check back in. Anybody else want to take on the Affordable Care Act and policy before I move on to a different question? All right, hearing none. No more policy questions. We also had a great question from Twitter. This is also from Kay Hanlon, and she was going back to the mobile apps. I think that got a lot of folks' attention when we were talking about that earlier. And she says, I'm assuming it's a she, I'm sorry. They say, I use an app, Moody Me, to check in where I am at and what extreme stressors are at play. What other apps are out there that can help me manage stress? I think we talked a little bit about this, but what do you all add? Kathleen, let's start with you.
We use a lot of suggesting apps to people, especially since I know most of the corporate work now has so many young people, and everybody has a smartphone with them. So again, back to my acronym, SELF, Serenity. I love Insight Timer. You can put a picture on there. You can put whatever time you want it to ding. You look into it, and it goes for 1 to 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 30 minutes. And what I love is after you do it, you can click on a thing and it shows you everybody in the world that's on that app that's meditating with you at the same time or being silent. And I love it because you see people in Australia, this and that. So that's one of my favorite apps. What we also know is a lot of people that I work with are type A, very driven business people, especially C-level people. And they can't get quiet. They have lived in such a huge, fast life. So for them, whether it's nature sounds, a lot of them grew up in the country, and whether they like bird sounds, whether they like cat purring, there's amazing, and one of my favorites is called the Relaxing Sounds app. It's got like 300 choices. There's a whale singing to its mother. I mean, it's unbelievable. And E is exercise instead of just running, and the ones that say how fast or how far you're going. I like the ones that have yoga stretches and Tai Chi and Qigong, because you can just use it for a minute or two in your office at an airport, and you can do chair yoga on an airplane. And L is love. There's lots of apps that connect you with other people, connect you with yourself, and are very sustaining. And F is food. I love the apps that have all the fast food places, because a lot of people that are hurried at a lunchtime think that they can get a fish sandwich at McDonald's or they can get a Subway and think it's all the same. And I love that it helps with choices. So if 3 of you are going to lunch or 4 of you, you can go right on that app, and whether it's Burger King, Taco Bell, or whatever, you know immediately how you to manage your calories and your fat for your day. So I love apps, and they're very effective.
Well, actually, you got people excited here in the office, and my research assistant here, she's going to buy the cat purring app. We didn't know things like that existed. So good for you. Anybody else want to add in on the mobile apps? I know, Peter, you've talked a lot about this already. I don't want to keep coming to you as the mobile app guy, but any other folks have for apps out there? All right, hearing none. We're just going to go. Thank you, Kathleen. Those were great. All right, I'm going to go back to Facebook for a minute because we've still got a lot of questions outstanding from Facebook. And this is from Facebook user Victoria Davies. Is vulnerability to unhealthy stress hard-coded or learned? And she goes on, therefore, can people fully change their responses? That's a heavy question. I'll give you guys a couple seconds to think about that because I hate calling on you without just giving you time to prepare. But let me start, Terry. I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. I think most people in the field aren't asking anymore, is it nature or nurture? We're talking about how they combine. I think that there are constitutions that are more easygoing and more resilient. There are constitutions that are more sensitive and would be more vulnerable to stress. But I also think, I want to echo what Catherine said. It's a lot about how you see your circumstance. People under stress always want to change their circumstances, and I think there's a lot to be said and done about your relationship to the circumstance that you're in. I think that it's very important that people move out of a victim sensibility into feeling empowered, feeling agency, feeling like they can do things and master things. And I think that there's an awful lot you can do with your head to deal with this. It's not just about the body, and it's not just about the externals.
Well said. Well said. I want to circle back around and connect, Terry, what you just said with the Facebook question to the previous conversation that Kathleen helped us with. And Lisa, I'm going to turn to you on this one. And it actually has to do with a little bit of the role of nutrition. You know, we heard it mentioned a couple of times here, but I'm wondering if maybe you want to say something about our healthy behaviors and what we choose to eat or choose to partake too much in, and how that can influence both negatively and positively our stress.
Well, if you think of your body as a machine, right, the higher premium stuff you put in it, the better it's going to work. So if you tend to be quarter pounders with cheese and fries, you're going to be a little sluggish. You're not taking care of yourself. You're going to feel bad. You're going to gain weight. It just creates a ripple effect. If you start really taking care of yourself, you're eating healthier, you're paying attention to what's going into your body, you feel better, you have more energy, you are more able to handle stress, and so it just makes everything that much easier.
Kathleen, let me come back to you on this one. You mentioned nutrition. You got me thinking about this, and then I think the folks watching this got thinking about it too. What can you say a little bit about nutrition and the role of stress?
It's very critical. I think I've spent a lot of time and been very blessed to spend with a lot of Aboriginal tribes because I've been fascinated with the way that they handle stress and depression and healthcare, and also different cultures. And one of the first things that these cultural people do is food. It's one of the last things we do. It's one of the first things they do. And so what I tell the people that I work with is to think of it as a soup. People love soup. They can identify with soup globally. So I say, imagine that you are a chemical soup. So whether you add peas or carrots or tomatoes, everything that you are doing is changing your chemical soup, because we process 100,000 chemical reactions in our brain every second. So how you're nourishing your body really changes everything. For an example, B6s, they help us produce serotonin. So something easy, simple, like keeping sweet potatoes, eating them intermittently, things like keeping a banana on your desk, they're huge. when you eat a regular salad, throw some turkey on there, throw some salmon. You might want to throw some tuna on it. All of those things help create the B6, which helps increase your serotonin level. Serotonin is the hormone that calms you, nourishes you, and it really does make a difference. Also, if you want to add a big bang, you produce oxytocin, which is that connection, binding, loving chemical when you're actually in the presence of someone. And so I say, for the biggest bang for your buck, twice a week, go out for lunch with the people you work with, and you can get the oxytocin, you can get the serotonin, and you can also get the nutrients that can help your body actually really be resilient to stress.
Kathleen, it'd be amazing if you did taxes, because you take things that are so complex and make them very simple and easy to understand. Thank you for that. You do a masterful job of that.
Thank you very much, Ben.
Catherine, did you want to comment on nutrition?
I'm not a registered dietitian, and I don't purport to be an expert in that area, but we certainly do know from the research that nutrition is very important. It's certainly important for individuals with chronic illness. We know from some of our Stress in America and willpower surveys that folks have a lot of trouble with willpower, and unfortunately, it is something that can be learned. But good eating habits go a long way in helping to manage illness, prevent illness, and just make for a healthier life. So there are lots of things that people can do to have better eating habits. But it's not easy if you've been the bacon cheeseburger whatever person all of your life. Learning new eating habits can take some time.
And this actually introduces a new question into the equation here, and I'm going to stay on nutrition just for a second to give an example, but we had a wonderful question come from Twitter that was basically asking, how can we help other people manage their stress, which I know I'm going to see many of you start to want to answer this one, but specifically the question is, sometimes we can take care of our own stress and we can recognize what's going wrong with us, but then we see other people out there, maybe they're the ones, Catherine, as you said, that are eating the bacon cheeseburger every day that shouldn't be, as a way to cope with stress. What can we do help those around us that are feeling most stressed? And let me start, Lisa, let me go back to you, and then I'm going to go to Peter on this one.
First off, you have to be really careful with that, because if you have other people who are eating unhealthy, let's say, I would really use good boundaries with that, and not just, you should eat better. Ask them if they want information, ask them if they're curious. If it's someone in your home, if it's a loved one, or it's how they're responding to stress, what I would say is practice compassionate accountability. So if your partner is, snapping at the kids or snapping at you because they're so stressed, in that moment, you have to protect you and your child. You also want to let your partner know that you're on their side. So you can let them know, like, look, I see that you're stressed. I can tell you had a hard day, and it's really hard on us when you're snapping at us. Is there any way I can help you? And I'd like you to watch how you're speaking to us. So it's both. I don't know that I'd be going to strangers or friends or whatever saying, watch what you eat, don't smoke, stay on your side of the line. And when it impacts you and it's in your home or your close circle and you're being impacted by it, then have your back and speak it.
Peter, your thoughts?
So frankly, it's not really my field, but just quickly, it's a lot especially between like family and a group of close friends. It's a lot about just understanding and support, and that's probably the most that you can do, basically.
Well, let's stay with you, Peter, on this, because as you talk, every time you talk, there's a tweet that comes out that has to do with mobile health. So you've got a lot of folks out there that are interested in your thoughts on this topic. We just got a question from Twitter. Katie Hanlon asked, is mHealth key to developing new stress management efforts and strategies?
We believe it's important, especially now because phone is really the tool that you always have with you. What we are really want to be careful with is we don't want to make the phone the thing that's causing your stress also, because of all of these constant interactions, constant online time. We see people go with into the bed with the phone. They wake up, the first thing they do is like they pick up their phone. We don't want to add even on top of that. And I think that mobile phones are great tools for awareness. They're great tools for relieving stress, even simple things like games. I mean, everyone has its own thing. But it can also add on top of it. So,
Thank you.
It's something that we do all the time, and that's the important part. Why M-Health is important here.
Great, thank you. Terry, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit and come to you. Actually, before we do that, let me go to Catherine. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to add to the mobile app, Ben. I think that from what Peter was saying, I certainly understand that people need to have breaks from their apps on the one hand. But on the other hand, we've got wonderful technology now that allows us to take, we used to put relaxation tapes and that sort of thing on cassettes. Some people don't even remember what those are, and then DVDs. And so the apps, I think, are wonderful for that. And I think we all need to appreciate that all of us need help and need cueing sometimes. There have been some really good things that are being done with apps with veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, to take them through certain kinds of exercises if they're in a phase of acute stress. And apps are being used to remind people to take their blood sugar and do other things like that. So I think there is tremendous benefit to come from the use of apps in helping people manage both physical and psychological disorders as we move into the future. And we know that when we cue people to do things, they tend to be more adherent and do the sorts of things they need to do to manage whatever the problem is that they're using the cueing for. So I'm all for seeing what we can do with apps. But again, as Peter said, very aware that there are many to whom the app seems to be attached like a mole or something to their body, and they do need to be able to take a little break from their app every now and then to maintain their mental health, I think.
Great, thank you, Catherine. Terry, I'm going to go to you on this question. This is actually bringing up a very important point. It has to do with gender and culture. And Leela on Twitter asked about the socio-cultural norms and maybe some of the reasons that men may keep more silent about stress than women. And I think maybe just hearing your thoughts on that, are there gender roles that we've kind of assigned ourselves to inadvertently, or are there certain socio-cultural roles that people may express stress a little bit differently?
Well, I think that just acknowledging that you're stressed at all is a gender issue. I like to say men are about as likely to acknowledge stress and reach out for help as they are to ask for directions, and for much the same reason. It's part of the traditional male role that one is invulnerable. For decades, the actuary tables are such that men live 10 years less long than women do, and that's not biology. That's because men don't reach out for help. And when they do get help, they're not as compliant as women are. So when women are distressed, they tend to know they're distressed, they admit that they're distressed, and they'll reach out to others. Men tend to bite the bullet. They deny that they're distressed even to themselves, and they certainly have a harder time admitting it to others. And I want to talk about the tremendous contribution that reaching out to others can make. I want to go back to that L in that self an acronym. We know from research that one of the most powerful de-stressors is company, is intimacy, is reaching out and talking about what's going on for you and getting some TLC and some comfort from those who love you. So admitting that you're stressed, turning to someone who cares about you, letting them help you and keep you company is incredibly important. As important as food and exercise. Intimacy is a huge factor. Let's not forget about that.
Okay, anyone else want to take on the gender or the societal role?
I'll add just one piece to that. We talk a lot about the fight or flight for stress. Our body's response goes into fight or flight. What they're finding is that women, they go to friend and befriend. To tend and befriend. So women really want connection. When they're stressed, what helps de-stress them is talking about it. They want to hug, they want to touch, they want, and men often say they want space for a moment. And this can really create a problem because women want to talk, men want to, move away a little bit. And so one of the things that would be helpful is if the woman is the one who's stressed, the men to step in and listen, right? They don't have to fix it, they just have to listen And if men are stressed, the women don't have to feel nervous that he's not talking to them. They just need to give them the space for a little bit and then check in after. Sometimes men go to activity or sports or something active to de-stress. And, you know, that's okay too. And if women can give them a little bit of the space and then come back after, that's helpful.
Thanks, Lisa. We're getting a question from the TEDMED website that asks this: are we getting better at quantifying stress? And what tests, measures, paradigms, or technologies are most accurate and helpful in measuring stress? Open that up for anybody. Who wants to tackle that one? Are we getting better at measuring this? Kathleen.
Excuse me. Our Stress in America survey that we use have people rate stress on a scale, which certainly is subjective, but I think people have a pretty good indication when they rate on a 1 to 10 scale, excuse me, what their stress levels are like. And they've been fairly consistent over time, although, as I said, the good news is that Americans are, excuse me, reporting a little bit less stress, although they seem to be more aware that that stress levels don't need to be so high either. So that's good news. But again, there are instruments that can be used to measure results of stress, for example, anxiety and depression and that sort of thing. So I don't know that we've got some inventories, but most of our measuring has been done on a scale like that, where we have people subjectively rate their sense of what their stress level is. And they're becoming more aware of stress. So I think people are more aware of it. Whether we're measuring it any more accurately from a scientific perspective, I don't know. But I think certainly, as we've been talking about the importance of thinking and thought processes to stress and that sort of thing, it really is the perception of the individual that's important there. And I think if someone thinks their stress level is high, I'm going to believe them when they tell me their stress level is high and work with them to try to find good solutions for them.
Well said, Catherine. Kathleen, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I did. They are having that, even if you don't feel like you're stressed or you feel like you're stressed, some of the quantitative things they're doing are testing telomeres. That's the end of your DNA strand, like shoelaces. And what we know is people that are chronically stressed, they get shorter and shorter, which affects the replication of DNA, which has tremendous effects on aging and also health consequences. So those are directly measurable with stress. They started out measuring them in California with healthcare providers that were taking care of people. Also, Glacier and the people at Ohio State have been doing great things. They actually can cut two people, and one person's stressed out, the other one is not, and they see that healing in the person that is much less stressed as opposed to the person that is stressed is dynamically different. They've also done all kinds of physiological tests. I love their research. So there are more clinical ways. In Atlanta, we also, they did a big research study here where they took men and women. We talk about the difference in men and women on the commute. LA, New York, all of us have big cities that have commutes. We live in one of the biggest ones. So the man and woman left on the same exact commute, same exact distance, got to the office. They did cortisol swabs of the saliva before they left and when they got to work. And what they showed was the man's was identical from the time he left to when he got to work, which my husband, who's a physician, also thought it was hilarious. He said, of course, they're listening to sports talk radio. What's not to love? But anyway, then the woman, of course, was like 1,000% more. And she does what most of us women do. She was calling her assistant. She was making plans for her children. She was, doing all of this busy work. So her stress was out of the ballpark by the time she got there. So in conclusion to what you were asking, we are finding all kinds of wonderful physiological scientific research to find out exactly how this stress is affecting us.
Wow. Kudos to you. That's fascinating. I think many of us who have lived in those commuting areas before do recognize how inherently stressful they can be. So thanks for bringing some research into this. Of course, right now, some of the questions that are coming online, we're hearing a little bit about moving from actively measuring to engaging patients. And I think this is a theme that we see a lot in some of the work that we've done, in that it's one thing to talk about, hey, here's a way to manage stress. It's another way to say, here's how we can engage our patient community on managing their stress. And I'm wondering if anybody wanted to talk a little bit about moving from measuring stress to actively engaging patients in stress management and doing something about it?
Ben, this is Catherine from. We had some interesting results in our Stress in America survey this year because we are very attuned to the healthcare environment and strong proponents of good integrated care, i.e., integrating behavioral and substance use issues into physical health, the physical health environment. And one of the things that was a little bit surprising about our survey was that there were things that individuals thought were important, like their stress and coping mechanisms and that sort of thing, that they had hoped their physicians would ask them about, but that their physicians didn't ask them about. So there was a real disconnect between what individuals thought their docs should be talking to them about and what their docs were or were not talking with them about. So I think there's a real need there for patient engagement. We certainly like for people to understand that primary care physicians are very, very busy people. And so I think it's also incumbent on individuals who have these issues to make sure that they are very intentional, even if it means writing down their concerns on an index card before their appointment with their physician, to be sure that they bring these things to the physician's attention. I think they will be addressed if they're brought up, but in the confines of a very busy primary practice schedule, a lot of times it just doesn't happen if the patient doesn't raise the issue.
Well said, Catherine. Terry.
Yeah, I want to emphasize the role of partners in this. You asked earlier about if somebody you know is distressed. I think that it's very important that people feel empowered to stand up for health in their family. A lot of the men who find themselves in doctors' offices are what I call wife-mandated referrals. And someone you love, I'm feeling that you're under a lot of distress. I want you to talk to your doctor about it.
Okay, and Kathleen, why don't you wrap us up on this topic?
What we're seeing more, again, this comes from a Harvard study that in public health that has gone out and researched more. The more that stress, the word stress tests negatively in 90% of people. They don't like the word. It makes them more stressed to talk about it. So the paradigm shift for myself and the work that we do is energy management. So when we talk to people about energy management, it's the opposite side of stress management, because the more stressed you are, the less energy. It's, you're going to be depressed. It sucks you, just like a parasite. So when we talk about energy management, people get more excited. I've tried it with several of my corporate clients, and it's just been amazing. The shifts in the employees because they want more energy. But when we talk about stress management, it's like, I'm so overwhelmed. So attitude is everything, and we're seeing a big difference because, again, it's all about the stress because that's what we talk about, but they are beginning to manage their own energy, which is very, very important.
Perfect segue here, and we're going to wrap up with one last question, and this is a short and simple question, or maybe not so simple, but I'm going to ask to each of you, and I'm going to start by modeling the question and the answer. So how do you personally manage stress? We're all busy people. How do you all manage stress? And I'll start. 4 a.m. in the morning is sacred time for me. I go to the gym, and I get my stress taken care of right then and there before the day starts. Catherine, how about you?
Exercise, although not as much as I should, personal relationships, and my spiritual and church life.
Great. Kathleen, what do you do?
Mindful living, and that's why I started the Mindful Living Network. If people live mindfully and realize every thought, word, and action that you have starts with you and has a ripple effect, that whether it's mindful eating, mindful children, mindful family, mindful gardening, whatever you do, mindfully. So that's what I do. I try to continually live mindfully every day.
Excellent. Lisa?
It's funny, my first answer was going to be really mindful. I slow things down. I try to watch what I'm thinking, watch how I respond, and I seek the help from family and friends that I need.
Peter?
So yeah, I'm trying to get some exercise in. That helps a lot. And on the other hand, just simple like one sitcom every once and then, it kind of helps you kind of disconnect from all constant on. And simple.
That's great. And Terry, close us out.
Exercise, meditation, and communication. If I'm stressed about something, I make myself go against my gender training, reach out to my wife or a friend, and talk things over. It almost always makes me feel better.
Well, thank you all. Well, Well, we are out of time, folks, and wow, this hour has gone by so quickly. We could probably talk about this for another 2 months, I guess. But I want to thank all of you. This conversation is going to continue on to TEDMED.com or on the Great Challenges page for coping with the impacts of stress. We've tweeted about a lot today, and I think many have seen this. So please share your reflections on today's dialogue. Let us know what you think. Ask new questions after the event there and on TEDMED's Facebook page or on using the Twitter hashtag Great Challenges. Everybody's input is welcome here because we do want to continue the dialogue. Join us for the next live event today at 3:30 Eastern on the future of personalized medicine with my good friend and colleague Greg Masters at 2 Health Guru, who's serving as moderator to a dynamic dialogue about the evolving advances in personalized medicine. So I just want to applaud this group, and I want to thank the team members who generously participated today, and thanks to the TEDMED community who also watched and sent in the questions. It means a lot to have you all engaged here. And finally, we want to say thank you again to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the sponsor of the Great Challenges program. So thanks everybody for joining. Stay on for Greg, and we'll talk to everybody later. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.